Chapter 1. Soleus gazed thoughtfully out of the deep-set window of thick-paned glass. The Veng River, in the valley far below, sparkled like a ribbon of blue and silver beyond the battlements towering over the grey granite courtyard. The early morning winter sun danced like diamonds and fire on the crystal-clear turquoise waters. Soft sunlight filtered pale gold through the deep green conifer boughs of the forest on the far shore. The cup of lavender and hyssop tea felt warm and smelt refreshingly fragrant in the high abbotess's hands. A small fire crackled brightly in the hearth of elegantly scrolled white marble beside the window. From the priestess's vantage point, in the tallest spire of the silver rose citadel, she could hear the shouts and ringing metal as the warrior priests and paladins of Heroneus drilled and trained in the garden courtyards below her. Near the cleric's desk of heavy mahogany and marble, a suit of angelic-crafted mithril plate armor, inlaid with moon opal wings, reflected the fire. But the ancient armor also burned with its own inner glow. The winter had been unusually harsh, and the spring long in coming. Planting season had almost arrived, but chunks of thin ice still clung to the stony shore of the river, and patches of snow still rested in the shaded parts of the gardens and the grasses outside the towering mammoth walls of the high citadel of the war god. Soleus's mind swirled with thoughts of managing low cellar stores, pleas for aid and healing from the lands about, and the whispers of discontent from her advisers, when despite their earnest counsel the high abbotess had ordered the lowering of taxes on the local villages to aid them through the winter. A soft knock on the door interrupted the high abbotess's reverie.
"Enter,"
Soleus called quietly. The heavy, iron-reinforced oaken door to her bedchamber swung open softly on well-oiled hinges. Jalal, a broad-shouldered, salt-and-pepper-haired priest in well-polished but battle-worn steel armor, stepped inside with a courteous bow. A look of concern and distaste darkened the crusader's wise, tattooed face.
"Yes?"
Soleus inquired. "Your Grace," the veteran warrior met the cleric's gaze. "There is an emissary in the diplomatic parlor." A distinct air of trepidation and distaste shaded the warrior's voice.
"You don't like him?"
The high abbotess smiled reassuringly. Jalal was an old and trusted friend. Soleus felt disquieted by the air of doubt and trepidation in the mighty warrior priest. Jalal had faced down countless foes. The paladin had brought them all low with his mighty spear and the fierce holy fires of Heroneus. But this new visitor clearly had set the warrior on edge. "Her," Jalal apologized. "She is here under diplomatic heraldry. She observed all the proper courtesies. But even so—"
"Another one?"
Soleus arched an eyebrow.
"That's 2 women emissaries in as many days."
The high abbotess mused thoughtfully. Jalal nodded in agreement. A half-smile emerged beneath the warrior's thick black moustache. "This one isn't quite as tall," the paladin noted. Soleus stood and gently laid her teacup down on her desk.
"Jalal?"
The Heronean priestess laid a comforting hand on the crusader's armored shoulder.
"I trust your judgment. What do I need to know?"
"She's a death knight," Jalal answered, "and she bears the symbol of Nerul." Soleus's voice hardened with surprise and concern.
And how did such a creature make it past the gate guards?
The abbotess demanded.
Who let her into the citadel proper?
We don't know, Jalal admitted. She just appeared there. She has done no harm, but she is rather insistent on seeing you. And she is, well... The steel-armored warrior paused as he searched for words. Rather compelling.
Very well.
The high priestess breathed with a decisive nod.
I shall attend to her momentarily. Did she give a name?
She did, Jalal told the cleric. She calls herself Maelstrom. The wide stairway and elegantly carved banister of silver-veined white marble swept majestically down from the citadel spire into the grand entry foyer. Solia strode quickly beneath the towering crenulated pillars of masterfully worked stone that rose gracefully from the polished flagstone floors to the domed ceiling high above. Pale sunlight shone down from tall stained glass windows in bright unbroken beams. It sparkled off the splashing fountains and glowed in the lush geometrically arranged gardens of roses and flowering trees filling the grand foyer. Waiting in a comfortable antechamber, decorated with polished white walnut and leather furniture, absently admiring the woven silk tapestries decorating the walls, waited a forbidding figure. The pale-skinned woman stood over 6 feet tall. Her raven hair tumbled over a demonically forged suit of heavy but intricately articulated, form-fitting plate mail of ebony black steel. The forbidding warrior, a coldly beautiful woman, gazed about with pale, radiant cobalt eyes. Deadly, razor-sharp spikes covered the Death Knight's armor and gauntlets. The emissary carried a massive, viciously curved great sword strapped across her back. Emblazoned in moon opal filigree on her breastplate and woven into her flowing black silk cloak was the fanged skull visage of Nerul, god of death.
Good morning, Your Grace.
Maelstrom greeted Solius politely. The Death Knight bowed with sincere respect.
I am honored to make your acquaintance.
Welcome to the Silver Rose Citadel.
Solius returned with equal formality.
What is your business here?
Maelstrom smiled.
Thank you for not asking how I got in.
Would you have told me if I had?
Solius inquired carefully.
No.
Maelstrom replied candidly.
Then, if you come in peace,
Solius told the Death Knight,
abide in safety and take comfort here while you visit.
I come to offer terms of truce.
Maelstrom told the Heronian priestess.
I didn't realize we were at war.
Solius returned soberly. The high abbotess unconsciously found comfort fumbling behind her back with the plain iron band about the middle finger of her right hand. Upon command, the ring would instantly transform into a great two-handed battle hammer, brimming with the holy energies of the cleric's war god patron. The presence of the Fist of Heronius, an artifact of fearsome might, felt reassuring in the foreboding company of a being which had, apparently, simply walked past the citadel guards and through one of the mightiest and most well-defended and powerfully warded fortresses in all the Flaness.
We are not, nor do I wish to be.
Maelstrom replied carefully. Solius found the Death Knight's sincere politeness oddly disquieting. Death Knights were renowned for their wanton cruelty and capriciousness as much as for their deadly might. But Maelstrom carried herself with an air of politeness that the High Priestess had not expected.
I come at the behest of my master, Lord Kyshon.
Solius inhaled deeply. Kyshon's infamous reputation she did know. Kyshon previously sat on the Council of the Society of the Seven. The Society of Wizards served as the ruling body of all the mages of the Flaness. The Society of the Seven consisted of a council of 2 black-robed conjurers, summoners, and necromancers, 2 grey-robed thaumaturgists, academics, seers, researchers, and advisors, and 2 white-robed evokers, shapers of mana and elemental energies. 1 high magistrate ruled over the council. An ancient grey elf of legendary power called Zorak of the North Wind currently held that position. Kyshon had once held the rank and title of Senior Black Robe after his predecessor, Naraxis, had defected from the society. Unbeknownst to the other council members, Kyshon, in a bid to increase his power, secretly made a pact with the death god Nerul. In exchange for the necromancer's immortal soul, Kyshon became the thrall of the death god. Rumors told that Kyshon had consummated the pact by murdering the junior white robe of the council, Rillin Fairystorm. The blood pact for his soul sealed, Nerul, the god of death, granted Kyshon the ability to wield powerful divine magic, in addition to the necromancer's considerable abilities with the arcane arts. When Zorak and the Society learned of Kyshon's treason, they banished him from the council and confronted him in battle. But even with Zorak's considerable might, the council members had failed to vanquish the necromancer. Kyshon had disappeared from sight years ago. Many assumed the rogue necromancer had left the world altogether and descended to the lower planes to sit at the side of his patron, Nerul.
You keep dangerous alliances.
Soleus told Maelstrom.
I am a Death Knight,
Maelstrom countered frankly.
but Lord Kyshon is a creature of
The undead emissary hesitated.
uncommon temperance.
Soleus raised a skeptical eyebrow.
Lord Kyshon seeks power, yes.
The Death Knight continued.
But he seeks a power balanced by alliance and mutual gain.
You will forgive me my skepticism.
Soleus shifted uncomfortably.
It is warranted,
The Death Knight agreed.
but in this case, not necessary. Lord Kyshon has allied with the lord and forces of your counterparts at the Blackthorn Citadel. They have, by merely acknowledging his sovereignty and agreeing to his tribute, remained intact. Their beliefs and worship remain unchanged, and they are now both enriched and strengthened under his banner. Lord Kyshon now offers you the same arrangement and alliance. Only grant him a token gift of a cup of water from your well and a bowl of earth from your cemetery. Keep your banners, but fly them beside his, and you shall continue just as you are now, uninterrupted.
Soleus exchanged a short but troubled glance with Jalal. And if we don't, Jalal wanted to know.
Please, your grace.
Maelstrom requested with polite candor.
The Silver Rose Citadel and your noble order have been a beacon of hope and strength for centuries. I implore you not to take that course. The world would be a better place if you and your followers could continue as you are. All my master asks is a chalice of water from your well and a bowl of earth from your cemetery. Just swear to make the strength of your forces available to him, should he call upon you, and he shall do the same for you.
Soleus met the Death Knight's gaze evenly and remained silent.
I see.
Maelstrom acquiesced disappointedly.
I am grateful for your candor and honored by your hospitality. You have until nightfall should you wish to change your mind.
The Death Knight bowed ceremoniously and then vanished. As the High Abbotess of the High Citadel of Heraneus turned to her most trusted adviser, The great silver warning bells of the citadel watchtowers began to toll along the walls outside, rich, clear, and deep, after centuries of silence. Soleus and Jalal exchanged glances. The two Heroneans made their way quickly for the narrow staircase at the rear of the grand foyer. Circling upward in tight spirals, the smooth steps rose precipitously. Soleus and Jalal finally emerged out of a carved white basalt archway onto the wide battlemented roof of the northern archer's tower. The breathtaking view of the rolling wooded hills, grassy fields, and winding silver river fell away in every direction, from the base of the tall promontory of rock upon which the citadel rested. The massive portcullis thundered shut. The drawbridge spanning the great ravine in front of the south gate rose up to meet and reinforce the closing titanic gates of steel and stone. Soleus and Jalal caught their collective breath. The warrior priests and guardian crusaders of the citadel carried a legendary reputation for their divine power, courage, and skill. The high citadel's garrison numbered nearly 1,000 shields, but surrounding the base of the plateau on every side, obscured in an ocean of grey mist, tens of thousands of black-armored warriors, dozens of colossal siege engines, and thousands of black tents and campfires spread out across the Veng River Valley at the plateau's western base. The Dark Army had appeared suddenly, seeming out of the mist itself, without warning. Never in her memory could the High Priestess recall a more vast or overwhelming legion.
Where did they come from?
Soleus demanded from the lookout, a young chestnut-haired cavalier in polished chainmail and a white tunic bearing the symbol of the rose. The young crusader wore a great longbow across his back.
From nowhere, Your Grace,
the archer explained hurriedly.
The mist filled the valley over the course of mere minutes, and then they were just there, like...
Like hell spat 'em out, Jalal finished.
Yes, sir.
The lookout nodded. Your Grace? Jalal turned toward the High Priestess. What is your will?
Well,
Soleus surveyed the vast force arrayed below them.
she gave us until nightfall, did she not?
That she did, Jalal nodded. Soleus mused slowly.
Then we have until dusk to give our descendants something to sing about for 1,000 years, and Heroneus reason to welcome us all to his table at the great feast.
Jalal smiled. The veteran paladin's booted heels came together with a clank of polished steel. His armored shoulders straightened as his gauntleted fist struck his chest in salute. I'll prepare your armor.
No.
Soleus smiled.
You rally the Citadel Guardian and the captains. I'll meet you above the gate shortly. How long will it take to load the trebuchets with the hellfire?
Within the hour, Jalal reassured the High Abbot.
Do better,
the cleric instructed. Jalal nodded and departed. Soleus closed her eyes. The priestess whispered a sacred mantra, and the tower rooftop suddenly became the interior of her bedchamber. The abbotess walked to the wooden mannequin in the corner and began removing her armor. Piece by piece, the warrior priestess quickly and expertly strapped it to her body. The angelic metal felt weightless. Soleus moved in it as freely as if she wore her most comfortable riding tunic and leggings. As the High Priestess pulled the polished winged great helm over her head, she whispered the name of her patron deity. The ring on her finger transformed into a great mithril battle hammer, forged of indestructible alien beauty and ferocity by the angelic smith Archaon of the angelic city of Elysian. The weapon bristled with divine energy and vibrated with power and anticipation of the righteous battle to come. Something rapped softly on the window glass. Soleus opened the window carefully. Perched on the windowsill outside, a large snowy white owl with piercing sapphire eyes regarded the cleric quizzically. Soleus smiled and greeted the owl.
Bigby, my old friend.
The owl tilted its head and hooted softly in reply.
I have an errand for you.
The high priestess removed a thick, worn leather pouch from beneath her polished breastplate. The owl hooted once more.
Take this to Ursius in Eru Tovar. You remember him?
The owl trilled musically in recognition of the name. Bigby's taloned feet scratched on the stone as she hopped inside. Soleus fastened the pouch securely to the owl's great leg. Bigby hooted once more, then silently took wing northwest into the gloaming winter sky. Soleus smiled.
Farewell, my old friend.
Then, with a whispered word, the high abbotess's quarters vanished. The priestess stood on the battlemented catwalk. The parapet overlooked the western gate, the canyon in front of the raised drawbridge, and the watchtowers on the far side of the ravine called the Howling Gorge. "I'll never get used to you doing that," Jalal remarked. The veteran warrior, usually able to conceal his start at Soleus's sudden appearances, smiled warmly as Soleus appeared beside him.
When we are done here,
Soleus told the paladin kindly,
I shall teach you how to do it yourself.
Jalal nodded fondly and turned his wizened gaze back to the dark hordes amassed in the floor of the Veng River Valley. "I'm gonna hold you to that, your grace." The black-armored Death Knight rode up to the far edge of the Howling Gorge. Maelstrom reined in her mount directly between the watchtowers on the opposite side of the chasm. The Death Knight sat atop a great ebony-scaled chimera. The creature stood over 24 hands off the ground at the shoulder. The great beast, armored in thick, polished black shadow steel, roared defiantly. The chimera reared to a stop, clawing at the rich stony earth beneath its taloned feet. The fanged jaws of the creature's 3 heads, a bull, a serpent, and a crocodile, dripped with venom. Their eyes glowed balefully with red corpse light.
Soleus of Haraneus.
Maelstrom's voice thundered like an ocean storm against the cliffs.
My lord Kyshon comes seeking alliance. As a token of friendship, my master asks only a chalice of water and a bowl of earth. Then, when his banner waves beside yours beneath the moon, we will leave here in friendship. No blood need be spilled here today.
Soleus stepped forward. The high abbotess's silver-booted feet gently left the ground. The warrior cleric rose into the air as wings of burning pearl and silver formed behind her. The light from Soleus's winged angelic armor filled the mist and shadow of the gathering dust with a blinding holy light. The obsidian mount beneath the Death Knight averted its gazes. The battalion of Kyshon's infantry faltered backward momentarily, shielding their eyes.
Hear me well, creature of the dark.
The voice of the high priestess filled the chasm beyond her gates like a freezing blizzard.
There is no alliance here for your lord and master. The only thing awaiting you here is justice and defeat.
Soleus leveled the burnished head of her angelic battle hammer. A scintillating bolt of white and silver plasma blasted forth. The arc spanned the chasm in an instant and slammed full force into the chest of the armored monstrosity beneath Maelstrom's saddle. The blast sent the gigantic creature sprawling backward. The chimera screamed in agony as the holy light ripped through its demonic bulk. Spewing seared blood and venom from all its jaws, Maelstrom's mount collapsed in an agonized spasm, seized violently, and then lay still. The red corpse light faded and disappeared from its eyes. The armada of Kyshon roared in fear and fury as Maelstrom rose unharmed with sinister elegance, from the wreckage of her mount.
So be it.
The Death Knight sighed. With a wave of Maelstrom's black gauntleted hand, a bridge of dark stone erupted from the chasm beneath her feet. The ribbon of stone snaked its way across the divide like a great flat granite serpent, crawling toward the gate. The Dark Legions began to charge forward across the bridge, even before it reached the gates on the other side.
"Are they fools?"
Jalal demanded, as the hundreds of black-armored warriors surged forward slowly across the bridge toward the securely closed gates of the citadel. Solia shook her head negatively. A slow smile of respect and determination played across her lips as she saw the group of black-robed necromantic mages form a summoning circle around their Death Knight General.
Ready the hellfire,
Solius advised softly.
"Ready the hellfire!"
shouted Jalal. The arcane chanting of the necromancers rose up on the wind. A blast of bluish flame erupted at the head of the charging army. The flames receded almost instantly as the conjured bridge met the gate side of the ravine. In their place now stood a titanic earth elemental. The ground shuddered as the mammoth biped of living rock struck its jagged fists against the gates like colossal battering rams. The walls of the citadel shook. The gates of the silver rose citadel shuddered, but held.
"Artillerymen!"
shouted Jalal.
"Target the bridge at the far end of the ravine!"
The walls trembled again, this time with the sound of cracking stone and the groan of iron.
"Release!"
shouted the citadel's steward. A dozen huge flaming orbs hurtled across the chasm, flung with expert precision from the pendulous arms of the great trebuchets mounted atop the citadel's gate and wall towers. The burning spheres smashed spectacularly among the screaming, dying hordes on the far side of the ravine. The golden flames burned fiercely, with no sign of subsiding, and blocked the entrance to the far side of the bridge. The earth elemental's gigantic stone fists met the gates again, splintering wood, splitting stone, and rending iron. The high priestess took to wing, arcing down from the battlement walls. Solia streaked down like a comet, blazing with iridescent light. The fist of Heraneus before her, the abbotess lanced into the great stone elemental. The battle hammer struck like lightning. The elemental shuddered violently as shards of stone flew in every direction. Despite its injury, the Colossus ignored the assault and continued pummeling the failing gates.
Fight me, demon!
Solius commanded. The armor's angelic wings held the cleric aloft as she slammed her blazing mithril weapon repeatedly into the mindless juggernaut. Chunks of granite splintered and flew from the elemental's towering frame. The gates finally caved in, just as the high priestess gave a final roar of fury, her strike sending what remained of the torn elemental plummeting into the mists of the ravine. The tumbling remains of the gate disappeared just behind it, lost in the deepening. Solius rose into the air above the sorceress bridge, shining like a great opal moon. Maelstrom strode confidently and unharmed through the raging hellfire. An icy blizzard swirled about the Death Knight. The freezing winds radiated outward like an ever-widening tornado of frost, beating back and finally quenching the hellfire that burned among the seared and charred corpses of Kyshon's black-armored Shadowblade minions.
"Ward the gate!"
cried Jalal.
"Archers, target the far end of the bridge!"
The black-armored Shadowblades marched forward across the Eldritch Bridge with the Death Knight at their forefront. A brigade of Citadel spearmen, followed closely by great sword-wielding warriors, flowed out onto the bridge from inside the Citadel grounds. All were clad in shining polished armor and girded in blue and white tabards with the silver and red rose crest of the Citadel. The Crusaders poured out from the fallen gates to meet the horde. The Citadel Guardian, Silver Rose's most dangerous and highly trained warrior, led the charge. Her deep scarlet cloak swirled about her ebony and gold dwarven plate armor. A tall spear of burnished dwarven steel swirled deftly before her. The Citadel Guardian strode forward defiantly and without hesitation toward the Death Knight. The Guardian's spear joined with the Deathknight General's massive, brutal greatsword in a blinding dance of sparks and ringing metal. The two forces blended together, clashing like the headwaters of two great rivers meeting one another in a stony delta. A rushing torrent of ringing metal, defiant shouts, and agonized screams filled the night above the howling gorge. The gate guard of Heraneus's Silver Rose Citadel held its ground as wave upon wave of Shadowblade raiders forced their way onto the bridge, only to be repelled and sent plummeting into the chasm. The Citadel Guardian, battered and exhausted, lost none of her footing as she warded off the lethal blows of Maelstrom's massive blade. A luminous glow emanating periodically from their winged high priestess above them bathed the legendary warriors of the Citadel and their spear-wielding guardian. The infantry's wounds healed, and they grew refreshed each time the light touched them. But the hordes of Kyshon were vast, and even the high priestess's might was not infinite. Soleus's bursts of healing light began to shine less and less. Then, one by one, the Citadel warriors faltered and began to fall into the chasm. Jalal's great longbow sang until he spent the last of his arrows and the supply of deadly feathered shafts being fetched for him. Dozens fell to the Citadel steward's deadly aim, and thousands to his battalion of wall archers. Soleus's divine energy nearly spent, the high priestess began her descent to join her warriors on the bridge. Then Soleus heard Jalal's warning cry.
"The courtyard!"
The veteran paladin shouted. With a mighty rush of her armor's angelic wings, Soleus soared back into the air and gazed into the stately garden courtyards of her citadel. A tall, skeletal figure in darkly luminous, hell-forged plate armor and a cloak that flowed like living shadow stood alone beneath the moon, surrounded by a massacre of fallen citadel guardsmen. The shadowy figure leaned on a tall, twisted staff of alien black metal topped with a large, luminous amethyst. Scores of arrows, spears, and javelins rained down on the wraith-like shape from the walls on all sides, but none of them ever found their mark. The figure raised his hand and clenched his fist. Jalal fell to his knees with a cry. The paladin clutched futilely at his chest, coughing gouts of blood. A voice filled the moonlit courtyard, and everything seemed to go dark and still.
"Give me my tribute, and I shall leave you in peace."
A furious light filled the high priestess's eyes. Soleus streaked down toward the dark abomination. The fist of Heraneus shone before her. The battle hammer struck the ground as she did. A deep, deafening clap of thunder filled the courtyard, and the ground shuddered. A radiant wave of divine power swept outward from the hammer strike. The light engulfed the Stygian figure of Kyshon, sending him reeling backward. The necromancer lord lost his footing and stumbled. A massive white bolt of scintillating holy power struck Kyshon's staggered form. An agonized, hissing scream tore from the Arch-Lich's lips. As Kyshon struggled to his feet, Soleus fell upon him, smashing her massive weapon into his chest, throwing him backward off his feet again. The armored necromancer collided with a great marble statue. Kyshon barely brought up his unearthly shadow steel staff in time to deflect the blow coming down upon his head. But despite it not connecting, a blast of holy force from the hammer's core still seared through the necromancer lord, and he howled in rage and agony. A bolt of black radiance lanced forth from Kyshon's fist and blasted the high priestess. Solia shuddered as an icy, life-stealing cold racked her body and brought her to her knees. Kyshon rose to his feet and brought his staff to bear. A sickening blue corpse light flared in the crystal atop the lich's staff. A wave of black light arced through the courtyard, engulfing the high priestess. It froze the Heronean clerk to the marrow, sickening her heart and draining the strength from her limbs. As the high abbotess stumbled, a crackling blast of holy energy shot forth from her outstretched hand. It struck her dark adversary, tearing the wraith-like necromancer lord's feet out from under him. Kyshon's staff clattered to the ground as his form crumpled and lay still. A howling shriek of rage and pain from Kyshon's Deathknight General ripped through the night air like a crack of thunder. The black-armored horde began to falter and fall back, confused and uncertain. The red-cloaked guardian of the Silver Rose Citadel pressed forward with renewed vigor. Soleus looked up to the wall at the fallen form of Jalal, the citadel's steward. Jalal seemed lost and small in the moonlight and shadow. Soleus staggered to her feet. Racked with exhaustion and pain, the abbotess made her way painfully toward the granite stairs in the high walls leading up to the battlements above the gate. After decades of friendship, the time had finally come to bid her friend farewell, until they met again at the great feast. The pain in Soleus's heart seemed overwhelming. The high priestess of Heroneus crossed the courtyard, but her legs grew steadily weaker beneath her. Soleus realized suddenly that not only was she moving the wrong way, away from the stairs and backward across the courtyard, but that before her she saw her own body crumple to the ground. Something drew Soleus away from herself, as though in a nightmare. The cleric turned to see the shadowy figure of Kyshon standing before her, as his demonic staff drew her spirit into the radiant chunk of uncut amethyst atop the weapon in Kyshon's outstretched hand. The crystal burned with disconcerting lavender fire. The jewel grew larger as Soleus's disembodied spirit flew helplessly toward it. The terrifying arcane incantation of her adversary filled the abbotess's ears. Then the crystalline lattice of her soul's prison became infinite. Soleus's last thought was of a snowy white owl flying away into the gloaming of a winter sunset, a worn leather pouch tied to its leg, and the sound of her father's voice singing her favorite lullaby to comfort her when she woke from a nightmare. The high abbotess of the Church of Heroneus remembered no more. Chapter 1. Soleus gazed thoughtfully out of the deep-set window of thick-paned glass. The Veng River, in the valley far below, sparkled like a ribbon of blue and silver beyond the battlements towering over the grey granite courtyard. The early morning winter sun danced like diamonds and fire on the crystal-clear turquoise waters. Soft sunlight filtered pale gold through the deep green conifer boughs of the forest on the far shore. The cup of lavender and hyssop tea felt warm and smelt refreshingly fragrant in the high abbotess's hands. A small fire crackled brightly in the hearth of elegantly scrolled white marble beside the window. From the priestess's vantage point, in the tallest spire of the Silver Rose Citadel, she could hear the shouts and ringing metal as the warrior priests and paladins of Heraneus drilled and trained in the garden courtyards below her. Near the cleric's desk of heavy mahogany and marble, a suit of angelic-crafted mithril plate armor, inlaid with moon opal wings, reflected the fire. But the ancient armor also burned with its own inner glow. The winter had been unusually harsh, and the spring long in coming. Planting season had almost arrived, but chunks of thin ice still clung to the stony shore of the river, and patches of snow still rested in the shaded parts of the gardens and the grasses outside the towering mammoth walls of the high citadel of the war god. Soleus's mind swirled with thoughts of managing low cellar stores, pleas for aid and healing from the lands about, and the whispers of discontent from her advisers, when despite their earnest counsel the High Abbotess had ordered the lowering of taxes on the local villages to aid them through the winter. A soft knock on the door interrupted the High Abbotess's reverie.
"Enter,"
Soleus called quietly. The heavy, iron-reinforced oaken door to her bedchamber swung open softly on well-oiled hinges. Jalal, a broad-shouldered, salt-and-pepper-haired priest in well-polished but battle-worn steel armor, stepped inside with a courteous bow. A look of concern and distaste darkened the crusader's wise, tattooed face.
"Yes?"
Soleus inquired. "Your Grace," the veteran warrior met the cleric's gaze. "There is an emissary in the diplomatic parlor." A distinct air of trepidation and distaste